Some disrespect is a mistake. Other disrespect is a message. And the problem isn't that people make mistakes. The problem is when you keep calling self-betrayal forgiveness. Many people forgive too quickly, not because they're strong, but because they're afraid of losing connection. They minimize what hurt them. They excuse what crossed the line. They sacrifice their peace to keep the peace. But protecting your self-worth requires clarity. Forgiveness does not mean access. Compassion does not require closeness. And understanding someone does not obligate you to stay. Psychological wisdom and Stoic thought make one thing clear. Some forms of disrespect are not accidents. They are patterns, and patterns are information. Today, we'll walk through 7 types of disrespect you should never forgive, not to fuel anger, not to encourage resentment, but to help you recognize when distance is healthier than tolerance. This is about boundaries, about dignity, about protecting your peace without guilt. If you're ready to stop excusing what hurts you and start honoring your self-worth, stay with me. And comment below, my peace comes first. 1. Repeated disrespect. After clear communication. There is a difference between a mistake and a pattern. A mistake happens once. A pattern repeats after clarity. This is the most important distinction to understand if you want to protect your peace. Many people forgive repeated disrespect because they confuse patience with strength. They explain again. They clarify again. They give one more chance. Again. But Stoic wisdom is direct here. Once a boundary is clearly communicated, what follows is not confusion. It is choice. If someone genuinely didn't know, they adjust. If they did know and continue anyway, they are testing something else. Your tolerance. Repeated disrespect after clear communication is not about misunderstanding your needs. It's about seeing whether your words carry consequences. This is why apologies alone are not enough. An apology without change is just a pause between violations. Stoicism teaches us to judge behavior, not promises. You don't protect your dignity by listening to explanations. You protect it by observing patterns. Think about how this shows up. You clearly state what bothers you. They acknowledge it. Then it happens again. You explain how it affects you. They apologize. Then it happens again. At some point, continuing to forgive is no longer kindness. It's self-abandonment. This doesn't mean you become cold or punitive. It means you stop arguing with reality. Repeated disrespect is information. It tells you how seriously someone takes you. It tells you how much effort they're willing to make. It tells you whether your well-being matters to them. Stoic philosophy reminds us, you are responsible for your response, not for teaching someone how to respect you. When someone repeatedly crosses a line you have already drawn clearly, distance becomes wisdom. Not anger, not revenge. Distance. You can forgive internally without granting continued access. You can understand someone's limitations without staying inside their patterns. And choosing distance does not make you unforgiving. It makes you self-respecting. Because boundaries that are never enforced are not boundaries. They are suggestions, and people who repeatedly ignore your boundaries are telling you exactly how they intend to treat you. Believe the pattern. Protect your peace. In the next section, we'll look at a more subtle form of disrespect. Public humiliation disguised as jokes, and why laughing it off slowly erodes self-worth more than direct insults ever could. 2. Public humiliation disguised as jokes. Some disrespect doesn't arrive as an insult. It arrives as laughter, a comment made in front of others, a joke at your expense, a remark followed by, "Relax, I'm just kidding." And when you don't laugh along, you're told you're too sensitive. Stoic wisdom sees through this immediately. Humor that consistently lowers your dignity is not humor. It's public positioning. The purpose isn't connection, it's hierarchy. When someone jokes at your expense in public, they are not trying to be funny. They are testing whether your self-respect can be negotiated. Many people forgive this type of disrespect because it feels socially awkward to address. They don't want to seem tense. They don't want to ruin the mood. They don't want to appear insecure. So they smile, they laugh it off, they stay silent. But silence, in this context, teaches the wrong lesson. Stoicism places enormous value on dignity, especially in social settings. Why? Because reputation and self-respect are closely linked. When someone repeatedly makes you the punchline, they are teaching others how to treat you. And once that dynamic is established, it rarely improves on its own. Here's the key distinction. Playful humor rises with you. Disrespectful humor pushes down on you. If the joke requires your diminishment to land, it's not harmless. It's a boundary violation performed publicly to limit your response. And when you're expected to accept it quietly, that expectation is the disrespect. Stoic philosophy doesn't demand confrontation in every situation, but it does demand clarity. You don't need to argue. You don't need to retaliate. You need to remove access, a calm boundary, a neutral withdrawal, a refusal to play along. Because forgiving this kind of behavior without change invites repetition. And repetition turns occasional discomfort into a permanent role. Public humiliation disguised as jokes is not something to rationalize. It reveals how someone sees you when power is social and consequences feel distant. You can forgive internally and still decide, I won't stay where my dignity is entertainment. Protecting your peace sometimes means stepping away from people who only feel tall when they make you smaller. In the next section, we'll examine a quieter but deeply damaging form of disrespect, dismissing your feelings as overreacting, and why emotional invalidation erodes self-worth faster than open conflict. 3. Dismissing your feelings as overreacting. Not all disrespect is loud. Some of it sounds reasonable, logical, even calm. You express that something hurt you, and instead of listening, you hear, "You're overreacting." It's not that serious. You're too sensitive. On the surface, it feels like a difference of opinion, but psychologically, it's something else. It's invalidation. Stoic wisdom makes an important distinction here. Your emotions are not always right, but they are always real. When someone consistently dismisses your feelings, they are not disagreeing with you. They are denying your inner experience, and that is a form of disrespect that quietly erodes self-worth. Many people forgive this behavior because it doesn't look aggressive. There's no yelling, no insults, no obvious hostility. So they second-guess themselves. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe I shouldn't feel this way. Maybe I need to toughen up. This is where damage begins. Stoicism teaches responsibility for one's inner state, but it does not teach self-erasure. Being emotionally disciplined does not mean allowing someone else to decide what you're allowed to feel. When your feelings are repeatedly dismissed, a pattern forms. You stop speaking up. You minimize yourself. You doubt your perception. Not because you've grown, but because you've been trained to distrust yourself. That's not growth. That's conditioning. There is a crucial difference between challenging an emotion and invalidating a person. A respectful response sounds like, "I don't see it the same way, but I hear you." Disrespect sounds like, "Your reaction is the problem." Stoic philosophy encourages clarity, not suppression. If someone cannot acknowledge your inner experience, even when they disagree, they are not relating to you as an equal. Forgiving this type of disrespect without change teaches people they can bypass your emotional reality without consequence. You don't need to argue about your feelings. You don't need to justify them. You need to observe the pattern. Repeated emotional dismissal tells you something important. This person is more committed to being right than to being respectful. You can forgive internally. You can let go of resentment. But protecting your peace may require distance from those who make you feel invisible in your own emotional life. In the next section, we'll look at consistent boundary testing, a form of disrespect that appears small at first, but gradually teaches others how far they can push you without consequence. 4. Consistent boundary testing. Some disrespect doesn't cross the line all at once. It approaches it repeatedly. Small pushes, subtle requests. Just this once. And each time you let it slide, the line moves. This is consistent boundary testing, one of the most exhausting forms of disrespect. At first, it feels minor. They ask for more time, more access, more emotional labor. You think, it's not a big deal. I don't want to seem difficult. I'll address it later. But Stoic wisdom is clear here. What you tolerate becomes your standard. Boundary testing is not accidental. It's exploratory. The person is learning how much resistance exists, and if there is none, they continue. This is why people who test boundaries often appear confused when you finally say no. They're not confused, they're surprised. They learned that your boundaries were flexible or negotiable. Stoicism teaches that boundaries are not threats. They are definitions. They define what you will accept, what you will step away from, and what you will not explain repeatedly. When someone consistently pushes past those definitions, they are not misunderstanding you. They are prioritizing their comfort over your peace. Many people forgive this behavior because it feels harsh to enforce limits. They don't want to disappoint. They don't want conflict. They don't want to seem rigid. So they keep adjusting. But adjustment without reciprocity leads to resentment, and resentment is the price paid for unprotected boundaries. Stoic philosophy reminds us, you are responsible for enforcing your limits, not for convincing others they're reasonable. If someone repeatedly tests your boundaries after they've been clearly set, the respectful response is not more explanation. It's distance, not dramatic distance, not angry withdrawal. Just consistent removal of access. Because forgiving constant boundary testing without change teaches people they can wear you down, and people who learn they can wear you down will. Protecting your peace sometimes means ending the negotiation. You don't owe unlimited availability. You don't owe endless patience. You don't owe access to those who repeatedly push past your limits. Boundaries only work when they're enforced. And enforcing them is not unkind, it's honest. In the next section, we'll look at one of the most revealing forms of disrespect. How someone treats you during moments of vulnerability, and why character is most clearly revealed when power is uneven. 5. Disrespect. During vulnerability, some people are respectful when you are strong. But character is revealed when you are vulnerable, when you're tired, when you're grieving, when you're unsure, when you've opened up and lowered your guard. Stoic wisdom pays close attention to this, because moments of vulnerability create an imbalance of power, and what someone does with that imbalance tells you everything. Disrespect during vulnerability is not always loud. Sometimes it looks like dismissal, a cold response when you needed care, impatience when you asked for understanding, using what you shared against you later. This type of disrespect cuts deeper because it violates trust, not just boundaries. Many people forgive this too quickly because they tell themselves they didn't mean it. They were stressed. I shouldn't have expected so much. But Stoicism teaches responsibility over excuses. Being vulnerable is not a mistake. Trusting someone is not weakness. Exploiting vulnerability is a choice. When someone disrespects you at your most exposed, they are showing how they handle power. And power reveals character. Stoic philosophy reminds us, a person's true values appear when they could hurt you, and choose not to. Or choose to. If someone minimizes you when you're hurting, mock you when you're open, or withdraws support when it's inconvenient, that information matters. Forgiving this behavior without reflection teaches your nervous system that safety is conditional. Over time, this leads to self-protection through silence and emotional shutdown, not because you've healed, but because you've learned it's unsafe to open up. That is not peace, that is survival. Protecting your peace sometimes means protecting your vulnerability. You don't need to punish, you don't need to accuse, you need to remember. Stoic wisdom doesn't ask you to harden your heart. It asks you to be selective with who has access to it. You can forgive internally and still decide, this person does not get my openness again. Because access to your vulnerable self is earned through consistency, care, and respect, and those who misuse it should not be given repeated chances to do so again. In the next section, we'll examine selective respect, when someone treats you well only when it benefits them, and why conditional respect is one of the clearest signs that forgiveness without distance is misplaced. 6. Selective respect, only when it benefits them. Respect that appears only when it's convenient is not respect, it's strategy. Selective respect looks like this. They are polite when they need something, attentive when you're useful, respectful when others are watching, but dismissive when you disagree, cold when you set boundaries, absent when you're no longer convenient. This type of disrespect is subtle because it comes and goes, and inconsistency creates confusion. Stoic wisdom warns against this pattern. Consistency is the mark of character, not mood, not circumstance, not benefit. When respect disappears the moment it costs someone something, it was never genuine. Many people forgive selective respect because they focus on the good moments. They're not always like this. They can be kind sometimes. Maybe I caught them at a bad time. But Stoicism teaches us to judge patterns, not isolated behavior. Integrity does not switch on and off. If someone respects you only when it serves them, they are not relating to you. They are managing you. This is where self-worth is quietly compromised. You start timing your honesty, softening your boundaries, avoiding disagreement, not because you're wrong, but because you've learned respect is conditional. That is not mutuality, that is leverage. Stoic philosophy reminds us, respect that must be earned repeatedly was never freely given. And respect that can be withdrawn at will is not a foundation for peace. Forgiving selective respect without changing access teaches people they can toggle your dignity. You don't need to confront aggressively. You don't need to accuse. You need to observe. Notice when respect appears. Notice when it disappears. Notice what changes when you stop being useful. This awareness alone restores power, because once you see the pattern, you stop personalizing it, and you stop negotiating with it. You can forgive internally and still decide, I will not stay in dynamics where my dignity is conditional. Protecting your peace sometimes means choosing consistency over charm, because charm without integrity is manipulation, and the absence of respect, even when wrapped in occasional kindness, is still disrespect. In the next and final type, we'll explore one of the quietest, yet most painful of forms of disrespect. Silent disrespect, where ignoring, withholding, and stonewalling communicate more than words ever could. 7. Silent disrespect, ignoring, withholding, stonewalling. Not all disrespect is spoken. Some of it is absence, messages unanswered, questions avoided, affection withdrawn without explanation, silence used as pressure. This is silent disrespect, and because it leaves no words behind, it's often the hardest to confront. Many people forgive this behavior because they struggle to prove it exists. There's nothing I can point to. They didn't actually say anything wrong. Maybe I'm imagining it. Stoic wisdom reminds us of something important. Silence is still a response. Ignoring is still communication. Withholding is still behavior. And when silence is used repeatedly to punish, control, or destabilize, it becomes a form of disrespect. Stonewalling creates anxiety. It forces you to chase clarity. It puts the emotional burden on you. And over time, this erodes self-worth. You begin questioning yourself, over-explaining, lowering your needs just to restore contact. That's not peace. That's pressure. Stoicism teaches emotional self-command, not emotional deprivation. When someone consistently withdraws communication instead of addressing issues directly, they are not seeking resolution. They are avoiding responsibility while shifting discomfort onto you. Forgiving this type of disrespect without boundaries teaches one lesson. My need for connection can be used against me. That lesson is costly. Silent disrespect is especially damaging because it looks passive. But passivity does not equal innocence. Withholding presence, care, or communication to control a dynamic is still an exercise of power. Stoic wisdom doesn't tell you to chase clarity from people who refuse to offer it. It tells you to observe the pattern and respond with self-respect. You don't need dramatic confrontation. You don't need ultimatums. You need to stop filling the silence with your energy. Distance is not punishment. It's protection. When silence becomes a pattern of disregard, your response does not need to be louder words. It needs to be less access. You can forgive internally. You can release resentment. But you don't stay engaged with people who disappear to maintain control. Peace requires reciprocity, and silence that repeatedly costs you your peace is not something to forgive and forget. It's something to recognize and step away from. When forgiveness ends and self-respect begins. At this point, something should be clear. This video was never about anger. It was never about revenge, and it was never about holding grudges. It was about discernment. Stoic wisdom and psychological maturity teach the same lesson. You can forgive someone internally and still decide they no longer belong in your life. Forgiveness releases resentment. Boundaries protect your peace. Confusing the two is how people stay trapped in relationships and dynamics that quietly drain their self-worth. Disrespect becomes dangerous when it's normalized, when patterns are excused, when boundaries are explained but not enforced, when peace is sacrificed to keep connection alive. Distance, in these cases, is not cruelty. It is clarity. You don't withdraw to punish. You withdraw to preserve. You don't step back because you're unforgiving. You step back because you've learned to listen to what behavior is telling you. Self-respect doesn't require confrontation in every case. It requires consistency. Consistency in what you allow. Consistency in what you step away from. Consistency in choosing peace over familiarity. And here is the quiet truth many people need to hear. If protecting your peace costs you access to someone who repeatedly disrespects you, that is not a loss. That is alignment. Final reflection. Peace is not weakness. Protecting your peace does not make you cold. It makes you clear. Clear about what you deserve. Clear about what you will no longer tolerate. Clear about who gets access to your time, energy, and vulnerability. The strongest boundaries are often silent. They look like less explaining, less chasing, less emotional labor, and more distance. If one of these 7 types of disrespect resonated with you, take it seriously. Not with anger, but with honesty. And if you're committed to choosing self-worth over repeated self-betrayal, comment below with this line: "My peace comes first." Because the moment you stop forgiving what keeps hurting you is the moment you begin protecting what actually matters. Your peace, your dignity, your self-worth.